for everyone passionate about landscape photography. I'm Grant Swinburne and I'll be your host on this show, talking to landscape photographers about their motivations, what photography means to them, and to dig a little deeper into the way they think about their photography. Sandra Bartocha grew up with a photojournalist father and a rural childhood that pointed her firmly toward nature and away from people. That foundation shaped a practice built on emotional resonance, where intimate detail, shifting light and quiet moods matter far more than sweeping panoramas. Based in Germany, Sandra works across natural landscapes, forests, plants, and abstract imagery, always with the same underlying intention, to evoke feeling rather than record fact. She builds her work in long-form bodies, books, exhibitions, audio-visual shows, rather than chasing the rhythms of social media. In this conversation, Sandra discusses photographing locally, her preference for forests and the sea, and why she keeps post-processing minimal by focusing on getting things right in camera. She reflects on what success actually means to her, personal expression and time spent outdoors, and speaks candidly about navigating a male-dominated field. She also considers where photography is heading amid AI and a renewed interest in film. A deeply considered photographer whose work has been recognised in Wildlife Photographer of the Year multiple times, Sandra's approach is a reminder that restraint and intention are creative strengths. I hope you enjoy the show. G'day, Sandra. Welcome to Landscape Photography World. How's your day been?
Well, my day just started. So right now we are here in the middle of Europe, Germany, and we have 10 o'clock. The sun is shining and it's a beautiful spring day.
Fantastic. Well, it's about 8 p.m. here and it's pretty dark, but it's still pretty hot and sweaty. We've had one of the hottest March is on record, and I think it's still about 25, 26 degrees at the moment at 8 p.m. So it's not as comfortable as I'd like.
I believe, we have an incredibly hot March, I must say. I think the world is coming to a very turbulent disruption when it comes to climate, I think, because temperatures have been rising from minus 12 to plus 18. Wow. Within a week, and all the lakes are still covered in ice, but somehow spring is on the way, and it's interesting to see.
Yeah, it is a bit bizarre. Let's talk photography though, and in particular landscape photography. Why are you a photographer, and why do you love landscape so much?
I mean, I must say that first of all, I don't consider myself a pure landscape photographer, but
I get that.
Yes, I know I'm on the Landscape Photographer podcast, and this takes a large part of my photography for sure. My love for photography really started because I grew up with photography. My dad was a photojournalist, and he picked me up from kindergarten, took me on his appointments, and so I was growing up with cameras and in a dark room. The only thing that was completely different, that I never cared so much about the living part of photography. I grew up in a countryside surrounded by fields and forests and lakes. I naturally leaned immediately towards the more natural things instead of people. And from the beginning, and I was a scout as well, so I was hiking in Europe and especially in Northern Europe. So the camera was already a part of my experience as a scout, taking my first pictures. And then, of course, this deep love of the photography medium as such through my dad.
Okay, interesting. And what was it about landscapes that made you connect so much with it? It's obviously a big part of you growing up in the country, but beyond that, you've got to kind of have an attachment to say, okay, well, that makes a picture, that doesn't. How do you connect with the landscape?
I think it's an interesting question because I think that especially if you are not growing up in a context of art or university, but growing up in a environment of amateurs or photo clubs or things like that, then you start nature photography by learning through books and magazines, and you kind of get your idea of a landscape already through that, because you see these grand landscapes and you are admiring them, and you want to travel the south of the USA just because of that. I mean, like I decided to go to America as an au pair when I was 18, just because I wanted to spend 1 month in the southwest of the USA back then to take photographs. And I read The Outdoor Photographer and read everything about tripods and so on. So I think that my idea of what a landscape would be, or a landscape photography could be, was formed by that, although it was not my native interest, maybe, because I think my native interest in landscapes is much more intimate and detailed, and much more of an escapism and light admiring moment, and not so much of capturing the grand landscape as such.
Yeah, sure. I want to talk to you a little bit about that and how that intimate landscape became such a big part of your work. Well, it's one of the things that your photography is definitely known for. What is it about those things, those small scenes, that really get you interested and get you to stop and either look down or look across at something that other photographers might not be looking at because they're looking at that wider landscape?
I think it started already quite early, and this is why I say it came very early to me. Like, my dad not only took me to his appointments or anything, but he always, of course, or I joined him when he was visiting exhibitions. And so I looked at a lot of exhibitions of like photographers just like displaying the landscape around our region. And I found it always very boring in a way. And this doesn't mean that I find landscape photography boring, but I think that the normal representation of landscape at that point I found very boring, because I always thought, I don't need to capture what I see, but I want to do something with photography that you don't see, or that is not so visible. And I think it's sometimes very, very tricky if you are in a grand landscape. I just experienced this winter for me. If you live in a landscape that is so beautiful and impressive, then it's very hard to look beyond, because you are just stopped down in your tracks by this amazing scenery. And the only thing that you can do is take a photo of this grand landscape. And I think a lot of my photography comes because I don't live in such a breathtaking landscape. I don't live in a mountainous region. I live in a very flat countryside. I mean, like, it's beautiful. It's nice to escape. It's not that it's not beautiful, but it's not so obviously beautiful that you kind of find your only way is to represent this grand scenes. And I think this is a big part. If you look at photography from Norway or from USA, from all these, or even from Australia or other like really spectacular sites, then it's so hard to go beyond this obvious nice landscape. But if you live in a very boring place, you don't even have the chance of capturing these great moments. And then I think I really started very early on to look at small things, to be excited by small movements of light. And I remember, I mean, like, this is a part of growing up as a photographer as well. You read books and you read this moment about, you don't have to capture everything with your wide angle, but you have to find out what is really interesting to you and then try to capture that. And I think this is something that's stuck in my mind as something, find out what is a fascinating thing. And most times it's not the whole
broader
thing.
scene. It's small. Yeah.
It's something very small, that captures your interest and arouses your curiosity. And I think this stayed with me. And when I now define what I'm triggered by, then it's definitely not the landscape as such, but it's mostly light that does something with something in the landscape.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned an interesting word there, triggered. And what that says to me is that something, whether it's an emotional switch or some other kind of feeling, I certainly recognise it within myself when I'm in the field. and this little switch goes and go, yes, this is what I want to see. What was that first moment that you felt that?
Yeah, I'm not a person of overanalyzing my approach. That makes it so hard. But I see that if I overanalyze what I do, then I'm kind of like leading a track of what is successful for me.
Sure.
And therefore, I'm just going with the flow. I don't remember what the first thing was because, I think that photography is such a strong part of you develop your skills, like technically, then you develop your sensibility in a way that you are aware of things. And then you train your capabilities of using the technique in order to capture what you see. And when you have infiltrated all that, then for me, it's just going out in the landscape. And, very important part for me is that I have an overall topic that I'm working for. So for me, photography always had an overlying idea. So I never just go out in a landscape or travel somewhere. I feel that if I do that, my photography stays very empty and very meaningless to me. So there's always a kind of body of work that stands above it. And this isn't a small thing. It doesn't need doesn't need to be a small project or a small series. It can be a very overlying topic, but it needs to have some kind of bracket in order for me to get going and get into this flow and creating work that kind of belongs to this overarching idea that I have.
Yeah, okay. Talking about those overarching ideas, is that looking at things from a creative challenge perspective, or is it looking to build a body of work around certain themes?
Yeah, it's definitely building a body of work around certain themes. For me, the technical part or the creative part or like using creative techniques is never a part of my creative practice in a way. Because I don't build portfolios of ICM images or I don't build portfolios of multi-exposures. Like for me, technique is used for being able to express my vision in this moment and what the object or subject demands. But the overarching topic is always based around an idea. I've been working in Scandinavia for 4 years on my lease project. So the overarching topic was really to capture the biomes of Scandinavia and really the landscape and the essence as it is, instead of like just focusing on what is the most beautiful beaches and mountains and forests in Scandinavia, but really the essence of Scandinavia. So that was my topic. And under this topic, I kind of searched for 4 years to get this essence. So this is one example. Right now I'm working on water as a very broad topic because this gives a lot of opportunities. But in the end, I want to express myself and have the audience feel something tangible in a way. And the reason is why I don't work for Instagram. Of course I show my work on Instagram, but sure. My real goal to produce work is, of course, first for me, because I like to be in the landscape. I like the escapism of all of that. But the real purpose of it is like creating a body of work that immerses people into my kind of world, be it in books or exhibitions or whatever. This is what I always have in my head. It's never going out, just creating a single image for the Instagram or whatever kind of social media outlet.
Okay. I'm interested by how different photographers think about that aspect in terms of why they share their work. Because I've actually met a couple of photographers who don't share their work on social media at all. They don't share their work anywhere, and they just have it on their hard disk, on their screens, and they look at it and admire it, which I personally find a little bit strange, but that's their thing. I'm interested in how you decided to start to share and what is it that drives you to share?
Yeah, I think sharing is important. I do have friends that do not share as well, and I don't understand. I mean, of course, creative practice and is very individual, and I think it's completely fine if somebody does it only for themselves. But for me, sharing is a big part. That doesn't mean evaluation is the same. I mean, I don't care so much about evaluation because otherwise I wouldn't develop. Because I think if you grow as an artist, evaluation can really build frontiers in your own development, because you just start to do all the same because it's admired. So I have experienced this, but I think, I started very early and maybe not by necessity, but because people have asked me to share. I was invited very early on festivals to have a presentation. So you start building your work. And then I had very early on already exhibitions because I grew up in a photo club culture where regular having exhibitions was kind of normal. So this moment of different or like people who are not acquainted with your work coming and seeing and admiring your vision, I think I really appreciated this from the beginning. And when I see now what it does to people and I'm like, it does the same to me. I go regularly in art exhibitions, and I know what this does to me and to my soul and to my well-being. I'm just happy when I see that people, after they go into my exhibition, and if I have exhibition at really big places, sometimes it takes them 1.5 hours to go through and watch the videos and installations and admiring the text and images or reading the text, not admiring them. But when they are ready and they are completely immersed in this world that I provided to them. And this gives me complete satisfaction, especially when I have the chance to exchange ideas with them after they have visited, or maybe even during visit when I guide through my exhibitions or anything. So this is really, really giving me a lot of pleasure. Next to the, I think we can separate that the most pleasure that I have is probably, of course, the process of being in the landscape and experiencing these moments and capturing the image. Because I think for everyone who is doing nature photography, this is a very big part of why we do this. Because otherwise we wouldn't take the hardship of being out when everybody has a nice time, sleeping or enjoying dinner or whatever.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that, getting up at stupid o'clock in the morning and going out to a beach an hour's drive away. I guess one of the things that I get from that is that desire to communicate. And I liken it a little bit to telling stories, even though you may not necessarily attach a story to a particular image or even a body of work. I think that telling of stories and telling people, here's what I've seen, here's where I've been, is a very important part of that sharing desire for photographers, and how they decide to communicate that, whether it's with additional words that come along or naming the image in certain ways, or whether it's just, here's the image, do with it what you will. And I think that communication is a key piece to why people share their images. Would you agree with that or disagree? Or
yeah, communication is absolutely vital for me in this respect. And I would say, my mission is, of course, the making the everyday magic like beautiful, or like making people aware that there is something very beautiful in everything. I think we are living in a time, let's be honest, that is not like very beautiful from the world turbulence perspective. And I think that like being able to see and admire these small things. I think if we are able to get an audience to appreciate those more, then I think the world would be a more peaceful place, probably.
I'd like to think so as well. You mentioned what success is to you, and I'm interested in exploring that a little more. How do you define success in your photography? What is success to you? Is it that communication? Is it something else? Is it monetary gain? Is it making a living?
Yeah, if you live off photography, and I decided quite early that I don't give classical workshops or tours. That's an income that I can't rely on. So the word success is, of course, a little bit based on, can I make a living based on what I earn instead from photography? So this is one part, but that is not important for me. So the reason is I always kept my overhead low and tried to say, if I can make a decent living of photography, then it's completely fine. But most important for me is personal expression. So I don't care whether it's commercially successful or whether I'm able to buy a house from it. But most meaningful for me and therefore most important for me is that I am able to do what I need to do and what I feel in this moment, that I don't feel obligated to do commercial jobs that I hate just for the sake of money, and that I'm able to spend as much time as I can outside to photograph. And I think everybody who does photography professionally knows that the real photography part is the smallest part of doing a business as a photographer, and I'm involved in so many voluntary things with the German Association of Nature Photography because I'm vice president there, and I'm organizing competitions and festivals and so on with my team. So that a lot of time is already lost on that. And so for me, it's so precious that I'm outside. And then if I'm able to maybe do 1 or 2 large exhibitions a year, then this is really what I'm most happy with.
And speaking of being a full-time professional photographer, that decision, how much of that was driven by your father being a photographer professionally? And do you think that influenced you very much?
Yeah, I'm like, it influenced me for sure. I mean, like, I saw my mom being a secretary or something, like spending days in the office, and my dad, who had this super nice job with all these cool people and like being around and out in the field all the time. So that was definitely a decision that I've done early, that I want to do a living of photography. But it was never a decision that was supported by my parents. Because my parents knew that photography is a hard and tough job, and everybody tells you you are not able to live of photography. My dad was like lucky because he was a photojournalist, so he was employed by the newspaper and got a decent amount of money for his photography. But their idea of being a photographer was always like combined with nobody's able to live of photography. And I mean, when I did this, I mean, like, I did study, I wanted to study photography, but it was very hard in Germany because it's very tough to go to get into universities, especially when you're coming from a nature photography perspective, because they are looking for different perspectives. And I'm sure with 18, my artistic voice was not very strong looking back. So I did a alibi university thing. I studied English and American literature and media studies because media studies had a very large part of photography and film, so that I'm really connected a little bit. But I never finished my university because photography became more and more important. I never wrote any papers, and so never took exams. Like when the chance came. Then in 2008, when there was an initiative that was called Wild Wonders of Europe, which was a Europe-wide initiative of sending like 70, 80 photographers from Europe into Europe to photograph Europe as it has never seen before. And I was very young at that point and very unknown, but apparently I was good enough to be part of this team, and they were in desperately search of female photographers. I was lucky because I think my career was started by that, and then I just got rid of the university and made a deep dive into the professional side of photography. And then it kind of grew from there, winning one competition and then being invited to speak. And from there, I developed to have a living. And it was good that I never experienced like the golden days of photo library. Because I think that photographers who really used to done a lot in the 2000s with the big photo libraries. They have built a living that they couldn't sustain later. But, for me, this was never the case. I went from student to photographer, and then just it grew from there. So it was a very natural way of being a professional photographer.
I guess one of the things that you mentioned there, they were looking for female photographers. I've noticed, and it's one of the things that I try to do here as much as I can, is get as many female photographers on the show as possible, because
I recognize that.
Yeah, to me, they're half the world's population. And so I've got 3 daughters and a wife, and so there's just me, the only male. So I'm very much in favour of getting females front and centre and getting their names out there. How has being female influenced how you've approached your professional photography? Do you think it's harder to get jobs as a female? Do you think it's tougher to get your name out there than it is for many men?
I think that's a very difficult question, I must say, that because on the one hand, I think I have had chances because of me being female that I might have not, because the competition would be too large. If you maybe, I'm like in our association, in the German Association for Nature Photography, we have about 25% female members and 75 males. I think this is about the percentage. I don't know. I think maybe it's a percentage of female doing nature photography, but maybe not. Maybe it's just the ones who want to be part of an association or whatever. And I see the same in competitions. For me, we definitely, I'm like me, and I mean me and my colleagues, my female colleagues, I think we definitely had a hard time growing up as nature photographers, because up to this day, there is moments when we are being laughed off by our male counterparts in terms of, I'm like, you are constantly reduced to the flower photographer or the one who is only taking unsharp pictures. There's always this joke of, technical part is not important for you because your pictures are unsharp anyway. Emancipating myself and a lot of mansplaining. I'm like, I don't experience one day when I'm at a maybe more populated place, and I really try to not go there. But sometimes you cannot do anything if you are at a lake and doing your photography. And of course, a male comes and tells you that you use the wrong tripod, that you use the wrong shutter speed, and that you photograph in the wrong direction anyway. I'm like, or I experience these things that you hike with your tripod and your camera gear, your 20-kilo camera bag on your shoulder with a male colleague, and somebody comes by and says, you are assisting. So, I mean, of course, we have all these mansplaining moments and these moments of not being taken serious by men and still being laughed and put into into something. But because there are so few of us in a way, I think if you are not this female, which is the most females do this, who don't want to be present, who don't want to be in the front, who don't want to be on stages because they say, I do it for me, I don't need to compete. So for me, maybe I'm more like a male, or maybe I have a very strong male persona in myself, but I do take part in competitions and I do put myself out. I mean, I would never do YouTube or something, I would never put myself out there and let a phone or GoPro follow me and put myself in front of the camera. But at least I have some tendencies that give me motivation to be part of this community actively. And I think this helped my visibility and this helped me being recognized as a female. And, the only thing is sometimes when you get an inquiry, you are the quota female. You are being asked on the jury because I need a female, or you are being asked to be on that and this because you are female. And sometimes this feels a little bit, I'm like, I know I have the opportunity in this moment, but it still feels not valued because I have a lot of values, when it comes to me being a judge. I've been judging photography competitions since 2007. So I have 19 years of experience all over the world in judging competitions. So I don't want to be invited to a jury because I'm a female, but because I'm an experienced person. Yeah. And I think this differentiation makes it sometimes hard. But I do think that I did have some chances in this field because there's this desperate need of like having a little bit of gender equality visible, and therefore I was invited to speak or whatever.
Yeah. I think it's most noticeable in the responses to competitions where that I think around about that 20 to 25% seems to be the ceiling for whatever reason that females tend to hit in terms of numbers entering those competitions. Now, whether it's the same people all the time or what, I don't know. But I struggle with that being the case because I don't think there's only 25% of the population, the overall landscape photography population. I'd say the proportion of women in that is much higher. It may not be 50-50, but I would say it's closer to 38, 40, 45% female as opposed to, but as you said, some are reticent to put their names out there and get themselves put forward. But then there's other people that are more than happy for that. And it's just something that I've always sort of struggled with understanding, and why men like to mansplain as well. I keep getting told off.
Men like competition. And I just recently had...
It's something that I've run a competition. I've been involved in competitions. I've entered a few. But to me, I just don't see the point personally, but that's me. It's just not.
I think I just had recently this post on Instagram where I asked female why they don't take part in competition, and then from there it developed this really beautiful conversation about why they don't take part, but sometimes why they feel discouraged when they not win and things like that. It's interesting. From a friend I just heard recently that their experience in the local photo club is that if females don't win, then they don't take part again in this maybe image of the month, while men try to get better from month to month, and they don't have a problem with, they are not discouraged by negative results, and that made me thinking because, and I got a lot of emails and personal messages from women who told me, for me, photography is so important and I don't want to be discouraged by negative results. And I know it from myself. My whole career is built on things coming to me and not things I actively search for. I've never been doing acquisition of anything, like exhibition places come to me, say, do you want to exhibit? I say, yes. I've never applied for anything because I think that rejection would be very hard on me. I'd much rather be invited to come and speak or whatever instead of hearing a no, thank you, we are not interested. Yeah. And I don't know if this is a character thing. I think it's definitely not helpful in many ways because I think actively leading your life and searching for opportunities is much better than waiting for opportunities to come. And when I'm like under this post, Andy Parkinson, a British wildlife photographer, he answered, I take part in competitions, and whether I win or not, it doesn't matter for me. I just take part. I'm like, for me, honestly, like being so experienced in judging, I know that for me it's the same. I take part in competitions where I know that maybe my style is not really appreciated, but it's the largest competition, and I just take part. It's a lottery. If I win, it's nice. If not, I don't blame myself or my photography for it. But I think too many females are taking this part too serious in a way. So one part is they don't want to compete. They don't want to compete because they say it's important for them, just for them. And the other thing is they don't to be rejected. And I think they have to harden a little bit because really, knowing from my own experience, and I'm an editor of a magazine, so I'm looking constantly for like interesting content. I'm with a team responsible for creating a festival with people on stage, I look for female perspectives. I'm looking for female jury members, and I have a hard time myself finding female perspectives that are interesting. And I mean this not in a way that I don't think that female perspectives are interesting, but they are not visible to me. And there we can ask the question, why are they not visible to me? And even if they are visible to me, sometimes I feel that the female perspective is sometimes maybe not as, and this is now I'm very soft ground, I think.
Okay, it's just
no, but I mean, like I think that tiptoeing around it, and maybe it's the sheer mass of male content that I have that I can choose from in a way, I can choose the most interesting photographer and find people who are really nerdy, because I don't care photography which is interchangeable. I'm looking for perspectives that I haven't seen before, that are not everywhere, that not everybody could do. If I'm looking for those perspectives, of course, the male canon has much more to offer for me than the female. Then I look at this small female thing that I have, the lists of photographers who are regularly collected on sites or under posts, and I look through them, I listen to podcasts and try to find interesting female voices. And it's much harder to find women who have really something beyond their little world of maybe doing photography like everyone else. And just because the world is so small, because most of them are not visible, and maybe the most interesting ones are not visible. Because of that, I fear that there's a strong female underrepresentation. And I really don't know how to solve this. Instead of, the only thing is that I can say, I try to encourage women to be more bold, to dare more, and go outside with their thing, because if they are not visible, they cannot be invited, or they cannot be shown, and they cannot be part of this world. And maybe, sometimes I get the answer of people that say, but I don't want to be. So, and that's true. I'm like, what can I say? What is the argument here? If they don't want to be
to do something or be somebody that they're not. And I think it's quite interesting what you were saying there about struggling to find people with different perspectives. I personally don't feel that I've had that same problem with either female or male people on the podcast. So some of the female photographers, in fact, I've found far more fascinating. Men I've spoken to, not just because of having that female perspective, but also because they, I think, look at the world in their certain way. And I'm talking about an individual way, not male or female, either way. But in their individuality, they're bringing forward concepts and ideas that have certainly opened my eyes up to different ways of doing things. And I do get what you mean, though. There's a lot of photographers, male and female, where their work, you use the word interchangeable. Their work and another photographer of equal ability, you could swap them. And whilst you might be able to tell if you really study this photographer or that photographer, that's their image, with some people, you can pretty much interchange them. But I think looking for voices and looking for people that have very different outlooks on life and different ways of looking at things is vital in our industry, because otherwise everything does look the same. And this is one of the problems I think social media has brought about, along with a lot of others. But one of the issues is that you do have this familiarity and trends. And, I know that there's been posts, or I think there's even whole channels which are devoted to looking at people where they've basically gone and taken the exact same shot, but 13 or 14 different photographers have got virtually the same image, stood in exactly the same spot with the same composition. And I think it goes beyond that to a certain perspective, because you also see that in the ways that people edit their images, the ways that they present their images. And some of that has to do with the trends. If you want to grow your audience in social media, and if you're working towards building a profile in social media, you kind of have to follow those trends. Otherwise, you just don't get seen.
Yeah, I mean, but this is what I said in the beginning, where I say you have to be very careful to not be falling into this trap of just pleasing the audience.
Exactly.
And growing in Instagram or growing your following isn't the most important part. I would like to encourage people, and this doesn't matter if it's female or males. I would encourage everyone to not go to places that have been photographed before. There are so many places in the world that have not been seen. There are so many small things that are not being covered by anyone, and always going to the same. And this is one of the reasons why I don't do workshops, because, people, I've done workshops and occasionally I do them, very occasionally. And I know that people come to my workshops to learn the magic of Sandra Bartocha. It's like, they want to learn my trade. They want to learn how to do a double exposure and how to do this and that. And of course, from a technical standpoint, I can teach them a few things. What kind of f-stop is better used for this and that. But I think in general, it comes down to finding your interest, really finding out what is interesting to you, and nurture this interest and develop a photography project from that. Because all this following what others do and liking it and repeating it and maybe even really like being a complete copycat of somebody doesn't help you. And I mean, from my own perspective, it's very hard for me how you can get satisfaction out of this. I mean, there must be a certain kind of satisfaction that comes from it, but it's very far from my own. For me, I've been traveling Lofoten Islands when it was still not overcrowded. And I have traveled Lofoten Islands when it was overcrowded. And just driving over this bridge where there's 30, 40 photographers with their tripod standing at the same spot, looking at the same image on Hamneu Bridge, and you think, why do you do this? What kind of satisfaction do you get out of this moment? Because then it takes away from the solitary experience we have in nature. So there's already the experience part that is missing when you are out in nature for yourself, just enjoying whatever develops in front of your eye, be it fog or like a special light situation. But then the other thing is, when you share it, it's completely interchangeable. Nobody else would point this picture to your origin. And I don't get why people are interested in that.
Yeah, I struggle with it as well. I mean, living here in Sydney, I've taken many photos of the Harbour Bridge and many photos of the Opera House. But I always, since having taken so many, I try now to look at it differently and try and work out ways of including it, because it's there and they're huge and they're a big part of the Sydney experience. But you've got to try to do that in a more unique way or from a unique viewpoint, which is hard. There are certain viewpoints that work. There's some that don't. But I do agree with you that many people just copy, but I also think that copying can be a part of learning. And I think early in your photography growth, that can be something that is worthwhile. And I think this has been true in art throughout history, is that copying is where you start to learn technique and learn composition and learn how to create on your own. It doesn't necessarily gel for everyone though. And I think there are people that it just continues and they just continue to copy and follow trends and so forth. But I think, as I said, social media drives some of that. But I also think that those that want to differentiate themselves are actually starting to do that from fairly early on. And they are looking for different places to go and photograph different things. And even if they're going to an iconic location, if they do their own due diligence around what's around that location, they can work to drive difference in not only the composition, but also the way that they express a feeling of a place. And I think that's one of the important things that a lot of people forget. That's what you're doing with your art, if it is indeed art for you. If it's just going someplace and collecting, I've been to Sydney, so here's the Sydney Opera House. I've been to Paris, so there's the Eiffel Tower. I've been to New York, so there's the Brooklyn Bridge or whatever. Each of those places has their own feeling, and that's what you've got to express.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very important part. Of course, like copying or learning, it's a very big part of learning. I agree completely. And maybe I'm looking at a genre which is taken up by very many people. Nature photography and landscape photography is a very popular topic for everyone in a way. You can take your mobile phone and take a picture of an opera house because you want to have a memory. And maybe I'm too cross on my peers, but I think because everybody, it's like if you do your camera roll, then it's private to you and you don't overshare it. So in a way, but of course we get overshared by the same. So I say that I think that still many people are stuck in this idea of just getting a recipe for photography instead of thinking themselves.
Yeah.
And I think this is what disturbs me, that we live in a culture that everybody needs a recipe for everyone. And this doesn't only apply to photography. I'm like, people need recipes to do their makeup, to do their hairs, to do dresses. I'm like, the whole Instagram and influencer culture is like driven by people need recipes for their lives. But I think when I turn this to photography, then I would just say, people should be more self-confident in finding their own take on the world instead of just following recipes. And I think our niche does need more views. I think we do. I'm in constant search for interesting perspectives and more and new visions of something. Or maybe I'm like, when we come to visual storytelling, then I think the world is told in many ways already. So I think it doesn't come down to creative approach, but I think it comes from a perspective of how do we tell stories and what do we tell.
Yeah.
I take a classic image of an opera if it's like built into a story about something that is different. So for me, it's more about what kind of story do we tell and not how we tell it in terms of visual representation. But yeah, what kind of photography do we do? What for?
Yeah. Do you have a favourite place, somewhere that you keep going back to that keeps calling you back?
Well, as I'm a very local photographer, I've been traveling Scandinavia quite a lot, but I must say that my local surrounding is a place where I go all the time. And that keeps calling me back. I know there has been a lot of things said about photographing locally and which advantages it has, but it does. You feel that you need to capture the moment. The weather is changing, and you just drive 5 or 10 minutes, or just go out in the nearest forest, and you are able to capture whatever there is. I'm very happy that I'm living directly at a forest. So if there is like morning frost or something very special, I can just go to the forest border and take photos. And like some of my most liked pictures and maybe most favorite pictures are pictures that are really like literally in front of my doorstep. And these are the places where I like to go regularly. But I really have a place that I love in the north of Germany, the island of Rügen, which is about 2 hours of driving from my part, from my village where I live. And I love the sea. Like everyone loves the sea and the rhythm of the waves and everything that water does to the landscape, to what the light does with water and waves. I cannot withdraw from that, although it's a very popular topic in all over the world. But my fascination for it is there as well. Yeah.
What would you do if you had to choose between the sea or the forest? Where would you pick?
I thought you say mountains or sea, because my answer would be very clear. But with forest and sea, that's not an easy thing, because I think it's quite balanced. I am so happy in a forest. I cannot express. The sea gives this wide impression. You can see endless and has this rhythmic thing of the waves. But a forest, my God, a beautiful forest. And I could never decide whether it's a birch or a beech or an oak forest. I'm like, I think a forest is just wonderful. And especially with a changing appearance. And I think maybe I would choose forest because I think it does change so much over the course of the year in terms of spring with all this vitality and the spring flowers, and then there is summer with this super dense and dark feeling, and then there is fall color, which is just incredible, and then even the winter. I love winter in the forest when it's all these gray tones and you finally are able to see the structure of these beautiful branches which are so naturally growing into something so beautiful that you cannot see because of the canopy all over the place during the year. So I really appreciate every season in the forest.
Yeah. Oh, that definitely sold me on it. But I think I'd pick the sea personally.
Yeah, I think being from Australia, you have a lot of beautiful coastline.
Yeah. I mean, for me and where I live, if it's raining, I will go to the mountains. There's a set of mountains. And when I say mountains, they're big hills for Europeans or Americans. But they're what we call them, the mountains, because there's waterfalls, because water really calls to me. And so I was up there actually yesterday driving through the mist and rain to go to a particular waterfall that only really flows when it rains. It's a trickle otherwise, and I mean a really tiny trickle. But yeah, when it rains, it's worth going, and it's only a short walk, but it's quite steep. And you go down into this little forested glade with the waterfall coming off the edge of the rocks, down into a couple of little cascades and down into a creek as it flows down and away. And it's just a beautiful little spot. And yeah, it would be hard for me to make that choice too, but I think I'd probably go with the sea.
Yeah, I think it always depends on the atmosphere and the situation, Sometimes we prefer this, sometimes you prefer that. I'm definitely not a mountain type of person, that's for sure. Because I think on the mountain, I'm like, you either be in the shadow or you are in the light. But being on the light always means you are on the top. And on the top, I feel limited because I have only 4 directions. But I think that mountain photographers would argue differently with me on that. But I'm with you on more of the sea when I would decide on that. Yeah.
So, what's your most memorable photographic experience? Where have you been that has really spoken to you?
I know you told me that this question would come, and I was really trying to think of a most memorable.
Some people struggle. Some people, it's just like that. It's straight up.
Yeah, because I think, it's the same like, I just can't answer a most memorable because I think that the memorable is within each moment I'm out, really, honestly. It's like I couldn't pick a season. I couldn't pick a most memorable moment because in the moment I'm out there, this is the moment I live and be and experience, and I'm the most happy person there is. And therefore, I couldn't say that there was a situation in my memory that was so special that it has not been overtaken by a new memory that has been taken later or has been made later.
Yeah, that's nice. That's a nice answer. What about horror stories? Have you had any really challenging experiences?
I think sometimes as a photographer, one does stupid things. I don't. I like my photography is not super dangerous, and I'm a very safety driven person in terms of I don't do really stupid things. But of course, I've almost done stupid things. Trying to go down a slope where you shouldn't. We have a limestone coast, and sometimes you try to take a shortcut, and you think you can slide down the hill, and these are like the cliffs that are maybe 100 meters high, and but they are very slippery, and it's pure limestone. And maybe I've done stupid things there in the past. I'm not maybe for sure, but in general, I'm really, really trying to be careful, and then it comes down back to to female and male, maybe understanding of how we are approaching nature photography. I don't like to be out in the field alone in the night. Although I love night photography, although I love to be out in the night, but I'm really easily scared. Sometimes, like I photographed aurora here in northern Germany in the field, and I was thinking of like when we have like polar light, then I will go to this tree, and then you stand alone in the night in the field, and everything is dark, and suddenly you hear voices, not voices, but noises, and something with, and I'm just scared. I was leaving the place. I didn't stand there for more hours. So this is something that is horrific in a way, but I struggle with it because I would love to spend more time in the night out in the field.
I definitely think your mind plays tricks on you when you're alone at night doing astrophotography or aurora photography, because I know myself. I've been standing in a field in front of a tree with the Milky Way or something rising behind it, and you do hear a noise, and you're looking around, and you're just not sure what that noise was. And I know people say Australia's really scary, but honestly, it's not. Most of the time, it's probably just a small animal or a lizard in the grass.
Yeah, but that can be scary too.
Yeah, depends. If it's a snake, that could be scary. But they don't tend to, I'm not saying they're not nocturnal, but they don't tend to move around as much at night. So
yes. I'm
less worried about them. And for us, probably the biggest thing that's likely to come towards you is a kangaroo. But yeah, I feel you're saying there, because at night on your own can be a scary place.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think the practice of photography has taught you about your relationship with the natural world?
It made me more aware. Like, I'm more attentive. I notice things, and I know how precious it is, and how important it is that we do everything to save it in a way, I mean, you see so many people who are not having any connections to the natural world whatsoever, and they just consume and live their kind of luxurious life, and already a fly or mosquito is something that is disturbing them. And I find this very dangerous for our all over well-being, and of course the importance of the natural world, and that it's like kept for future centuries or future generations. I know nature will withstand without us, so it's a purely egoistic way that we protect nature. But for me, photography really, really helps me to understand things, especially when you do a deep dive into certain topics or plans. If you're not just using the landscape as your subject, but really making it your kind of deep search project where you read about it and learn things about it.
Do you prefer photographing with other people or alone?
I love to go to places with people and photographing alone then. So, I love to go with friends and drive to a place and having maybe a rented house and having a great time together. But if we are starting to go to a place, then most of the time I just withdraw from the group and just stay there and let the others go, because otherwise it's just talking, and it's not, because I need to go get into the mood, and therefore this is a pure lonely thing. I need to concentrate on myself and my surrounding.
Yeah, okay. What about when you get back from being in the field and you start to think about processing? Are you straight into your processing when you come back to the studio, or do you leave things for a while and just let them sit?
Yes.
Later?
I have millions of unprocessed images on my hard drives. I've never deleted any of my images, so I probably have about 24 terabyte of data collected right now. Of course, 3 times backup, so it's a lot of hard drives everywhere. I hate computer work. Already my email post inbox and everything feels threatening to me. I'm really not a fan of processing immediately, and I'm not a fan of spending more time on the computer. Like, I do everything I do in the landscape as much as I can, and even if it's not good for the, some people say exposed to the right or do that and that to keep the most possibility of colors and everything being in the picture. I don't care, I photograph in the field on my screen. My display needs to make me happy. I use Nikon with vivid mode because I still come from slide times with in a Fujichrome. So, when I turned to digital photography, I wanted to emulate the same colors that the Fujifilm did, and I'm still in this colorful journey, and I want to have it on my screen. So in post-production, I almost do nothing. I export my files like a very old dinosaur, not in Lightroom because I hate Lightroom. I use the Nikon transfer, and then I just export the TIFF, 16-bit TIFF from it. I maybe do a little bit of tonal corrections or the black and the whites and everything that is needed. But I really, really like to do everything I can in the field to make sure that the picture is great. And everything else is just tedious.
I find that difficult to work out personally, but that's me. My practice is that the editing is not necessarily 50%, but it's per image, it's 50% of the process. Capturing the image might only take a fraction of a second, but then if I don't spend enough time looking at it and not necessarily tweaking it, but I will do different things. I'll flip it upside down. I'll make it black and white to make sure that the tonal curve is right and those sorts of things. But for me, it's really important to spend that time with the image if it's going to be a portfolio image. If I'm just chucking it up onto Instagram because I went out yesterday and took a photo of a waterfall and I want to throw up an image of a waterfall, then I don't spend a lot of time, 10 minutes maybe, if that.
But I find it interesting. I mean, for me, I remember Kai Horno, who won the International Landscape Photographer of the Year once with a picture from Ireland. And he explained how many hours he spent on this picture.
I know.
And sorry, Kai, it's not against the picture and not against you. It's a beautiful picture. But when I look at the picture, I ask, why do you spend so many hours on it? I'm like, what did he do to it? For me, I mean, honestly, my DNA is just not understanding how you can sit in front of the computer and think that it needs hours of editing and masks here and masks there and luminosity here. And, I just don't get it. I mean, maybe my pictures are too perfect immediately. But really, this part of photography is really, really far away. And then I must say, of course, I come from a standpoint of, we do nature photography competitions where it's not allowed to edit so much. We do raw control in our European Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition. And when I see sometimes what people did to their original image, where I think, okay, the original image looks like nothing, and now it looks like something, then I must say, of course, and it's completely valid, because I think your part that you just expressed is a completely important part of self-expression that is completely valid in its own way. It's just that I think when you compare photography, then the creative part should not only be in the editing part, but very much come from experience and
you've got raw materials before you can craft something that's.
But I think there's two different approaches. Some people just love to do everything in the edit to push the best out of their image, and some people like me are just hating it so much.
Yeah. I mean, I've spoken to people that do virtually no editing, like yourself. It's like this click, few sliders here, few sliders there, that's it, done. And that's fine. That's how they express themselves. Still amazing images. And that's the key is if
the result is important.
Yeah. Then how it got there matters less, to me anyway.
And this is another, this comes in back to another recipe, because you experience it for sure in your workshops or whatever, that people ask, how do I have to edit this? And then it's the same answer. There is no recipe,
How
For
you want to
it
do
might be
it.
the recipe of working an hour on the image. And for the other one, the recipe is just doing like curves, and then it's ready.
Yeah. I mean, there are recipes for things like printing. Do you print your own work, or do you have somebody do printing for you?
Yeah, I mean, somebody else prints for me, but I do prepare the images for printing. Like if they look on my screen, I want my printer that they look the same. So I'm like, what I know, of course, and I'm working a lot in print in offset printing and like fine art printing. So I know that paper is always sucking light and contrast. So I know that I need to lighten up the images and like increase contrast and lighten shadows and things like that for print. I know that. But other from that, I want the images that they look like on my screen. So
the key is having a calibrated screen and making sure that you understand what the printer needs, I think.
It's better so much with that part somehow. But I think they either don't use the right printer. And if they print themselves, I know that from my friend who's doing all my prints, it's an art form to print correctly.
It is a set of skills in and of itself.
Yeah.
How about when you struggle to find inspiration? What do you do about those times when creative blocks appear and you're sitting there going, I'm not feeling it. It's just not working for me. How do you get around that? Do you do anything? Do you do something different? Do you force it and do more photography?
I think I have come to accept these things because I know that usually they lead to more interesting work in the end. I think that my creative blocks don't come from me personally, but they are more a thing of me being bored of my own work. Sometimes I have the feeling right now I'm in a phase where I have the feeling that my type of photography is so much around that so many people do it like I do, and that they kind of have the same way of seeing things and representing things and naming things, and that I feel that what I felt was kind of unique at one certain time is not so unique anymore. And so you could call this a creative block, and sometimes I think, where does it lead? But, I'm not actively doing things to get my creative juices going. I just let it flow and see what I do when I'm outside. And especially I'm thinking of how my work can be put in another context in order to be meaningful for me again. Because at that stage, it's the most important thing that it's meaningful for me. Because when I'm bored of my own work, that is the most tough thing for me, when I feel that my own work doesn't mean anything to me. So it's not so much about the audience or the recognition, because I think, there's people out there who post the same things since 12,000 years and they still get recognition for it. So for me, it's never about the recognition from the outside. It's really my own appreciation of what I do.
Yeah, nice. What about photography's place in society? We talked a bit about some of the struggles with social media and so forth. What do you see as photography's place in society, and where do you think its future lies?
I think we have a big problem. And I really have a lot of question marks in terms of, every day you read articles these days that creative vision is being overtaken by AI. And that AI does play such an important role in people's lives these days, that they are, and it's getting so much better. And I'm like, right now, you see that photography and video and whatever is already mistaken for real, which is taken by not human bodies. And therefore, I think that the pure image is becoming less and less important. So photography as such will always be important, because I think that our society in general is very visual. So visuals are always very important. The question is, do they tell the truth? Are they made up? And I think then it comes back to putting them back in a larger body of work. And then it actually doesn't matter whether it's created by a person or AI, because the people or person who prompts needs to have a vision as well. Like telling stories by images, being them in the end, AI is another tool of creating visuals. So I think in the end, the photography in our society will be more important in terms of what kind of stories, like real stories, not artificial stories, but stories that touch people, are we able to tell with our own photography.
Yeah, I had a conversation recently with another photographer, and it was about the value of photography. And certainly from my perspective, I don't think photography has gained a lot of value recently. In fact, I think in certain circumstances, it's probably lost a lot of its value. I don't think that corporate companies and so forth value photography and the art and the creation of that art as much as probably used to. You find those that are switching to using AI and so forth, they're doing it purely from economic means. They want to make it they want to make a piece of content. And let's face it, it's 99.9% advertising. They're wanting to make that as cheap as possible. So I can see why that's done. I do think, though, that said, that there is still inherent value in the creative process. You will certainly see that higher end brands are less likely to do that sort of thing because they do value the quality of the image or the style of a particular photographer. And whilst AI may be able to replicate some of that, I still think they're going to value some of those capabilities from a corporate perspective. But I think that said, also from a experience perspective, people, and in telling those stories, people that go out into nature and create their images is going to be somehow valued probably more in the future as more and more content is generated. I'd be interested to see how you react to that sort of comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to differentiate again, as you said. I think in the commercial context, photography will become less and less important. And I always say that we are totally lucky to be in a photography niche where it's more important about the process than only the result. Like you doing workshops and tours, you know that for people it's important to get out of their life reality, to be out in nature, to capture their own image of that and this. And therefore, I think photography still plays a very, very important role in the process of just doing it, and not because we want to sell images of something. So I think this is why nature photography and landscape photography will survive. People love to do this.
Yeah. That's what I think is going to be the future. I may well be wrong.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like, the past 2-3 years have been a roller coaster of development. So I'm curious of where it leads us. I mean, like, there's this big and strong thing coming back of analog film, and people.
Absolutely.
I mean, like, I see professional photographers now using old analog film again and going to Hokkaido and photograph landscapes with light coming into the camera and having this raw feeling of not being created by a machine. We'll see. We'll see.
What's the best and or worst piece of advice anyone has given you?
Take care of your books. Yeah, I mean, like, the best thing is like being a person that people want to be around with and be reliable. When you are a professional photographer, like do your job. Don't be a nuisance. I think this is something that was a very valuable advice that I got. And I think the worst advice you are getting always by everyone who's trying to tell you in which direction you have to point your camera instead of your own. And I mean, like, just don't listen to other people telling you what to photograph. Yeah. And this starts with asking other people where it's being nice. And I'm getting a lot of emails of people asking me, I'm going to visit the island of Rügen next month. Can you give me some advices? And I think the sun goes up in the east and it goes down in the west. please look at the map.
That's wonderful.
I think everyone needs to find their own way of really finding things. I think giving advice to somebody will never be helpful because everybody has such a different understanding of what they want that any advice that I could give or somebody could give me is completely lost on my idea of what I want.
Yeah. Have you got a couple of names for me of photographers that I should be talking to on the podcast?
Yeah, because, I thought like encouraging female empowerment even more on your podcast. I would, and I saw you don't really have a complete list of people you have spoken to, so I'm not sure.
You've actually got to go through each of them. I probably should put together a list on the...
Yeah, that would be helpful, like alphabetically, so that you get not names called all the time that have already been on your podcast. But I would recommend Isabel Gilch. She is a Spanish photographer, seascape photographer. She's a wonderful human being and probably has a lot of things to say. And I think what is another photographer, she's Hungarian but lives in Norway since many, many years, Oshalberg. I don't know if you heard of her.
I haven't. No.
She's wonderful. She's a wonderful, very outspoken lady. She has just published a book about fjell. She's a mountaineer photographer, and I think she's very singular in what she does because I think she climbs mountains that no man dare to climb. And or maybe mountain climbers do, but not photographers. But combining photography with mountain climbing, and I don't mean climbing with ropes and everything, but being a fine art photographer on these Norwegian mountains, and really creating beautiful work there. I think you should check those two females out.
Fantastic. Thanks very much for that. My last question is one that I've been asking since the beginning. Do you like pineapple on pizza?
No, we call it pizza Hawaii. Hawaii. I'm like Hawaii, and in German,
the Hawaiian pizza. Yeah.
Yeah, the Hawaiian pizza. But I always call it Hawaii because E is something very yuck and ugly. So like really something. No. Fruit and things shouldn't go together. No.
Okay. To each their own. It's been wonderful getting to know you, Sandra. Thank you so much for being on the show. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, right now, under my website, sandrabartocha.com, that is hopefully finally soon my website that is always under progress. But really, this is a to-go site if you would want to find my work in the future. And then my Instagram, which is a really updated, recent, I like all the time. So Instagram is a way to go.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to Landscape Photography World. I hope you enjoyed the show and keep listening because I'll be joined by some great guests in upcoming episodes. You can find my work in this podcast at gruntswinburnphotography.com along with prints and photography gear. I'm also on Vero, Photo, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook and Blue Sky. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe because it really helps to get the podcast to be seen and heard. I'm Grant Swinburne. Hope to see you out shooting soon.